Selling England by the pound, Genesis. Back in the early 70s, sometimes bands we thought were cool had hit singles. We only had one pop music station, Wonderful Radio 1, and it mostly seemed to play bubblegum and mum and dad music. But sometimes acts like Deep Purple and Black Sabbath had hits. So when Genesis had a hit single with I Know What I Like in Your Wardrobe, I automatically liked it. However, I was not so impressed by the album. Like a lot of music that did not impress me as a teenager, I revisited the album in the age of cheap CDs and streaming. It is very highly rated by prog fans. It often tops lists, and prog fans love lists. I would not have called myself a Genesis fan, not even in the Gabriel years. And the Gabriel years are definitely not so derided as the 80s pop years. It seems to me that in the area of classic rock, you are expected to commit to an artist rather than just pick and choose. But no one expects that if you like The Lark Ascending, you must also be familiar with and have an opinion on everything else written by Vaughan Williams. I find that early Genesis has the odd sublime uplifting moments, but to find them you need to trudge through whole passages of badly stitched together, uninteresting and disparate nonsense. The song on this album that I enjoyed most for most of its duration was the opening track, Dancing with the Moonlit Night. It does for me everything I quite like about Peter Gabriel era Genesis. It starts with a folky melody which then climaxes with an operatic fanfare, leading to a full-on 4/4 rock-out with guitar and keyboard solos. It has a little tricky bit at the end and some very brief dissonant chords, and Genesis very rarely did dissonance. However, the track Battle of Epping Forest is exactly why I never became a Genesis fan back in the day. It is a wordy piece with few musical ideas. The lyrics have little tune, rhyme or scansion, and are sung rather like operatic recitative, and the silly voices are very off-putting. But the musical motifs are quite catchy, and it is not as bad as Get Them Out by Friday, a similar song on their previous album that totally leaves me cold. The reason I chose to revisit this album was because I heard the track Firth of Fifth, and I absolutely fell in love with the piano intro. The bulk of the song is good in a standard 1970s Genesis kind of way, but the return of the intro motif is somewhat spoilt for me by it being played on a synthesizer. However, it does have a fine guitar solo, and it ends with a rather nice précis of the vocal part. Cinema Show is a sweet song with some tuneful guitar and a pastoral harp that becomes a typical Genesis festival of keyboard arpeggios. The short songs are quite pleasant. I was shocked to find I even quite like the one with Phil Collins singing. The album has some very nice lead guitar that has aged well, but there is an awful lot of synth playing that now sounds dated. Even so, it is still probably the only Genesis album I would listen to all the way through. Selling England by the pound, Genesis.